Chapter 241. What the fuck? Has the battle ended? The audience in the guild stared at Chunkster, who was lying flat on the ground lifelessly. They looked at each other in disbelief. At first, they thought that Dustin would never win, but the battle ended with a huge twist. More importantly, Dustin had only made one move throughout the battle, which was terrifying, to say the least. Fuck. That dude won. What happened? Otto's eyes widened, and he looked incredulous. Dustin Rhys beat Chunkster, who had defeated Mr. Chapman. Would that mean Dustin was more powerful than Mr. Chapman? Impossible. That guy must have pulled some tricks. Why else could he win without breaking a sweat? Julie vehemently shook her head, refusing to accept the outcome. What happened just now? Why did Chunkster collapse after the touch? Brody was confounded. Chunkster's defense should have been impenetrable for most, except for Maximus and the King of Kicks. What trick did Dustin pull to win? He's quite something. He found Chunkster's weakness in no time. Maximus narrowed his eyes and appeared quite taken aback. The others might be oblivious to the strategy behind the move, but Maximus knew that Dustin had found Chunkster's weakness and focused his attack on it, which resulted in the surprise victory. No wonder he was so confident. He came prepared. The hawk-nosed old man scoffed. He would have acknowledged Dustin's talent if the latter had taken down the opponent with his skills, but the trick that Dustin pulled was cowardly. Ha ha ha. He won. Dustin, you're awesome. After overcoming the shock, Ruth jumped up and down with joy. What's so great about it? He had to thank Mr. Wangley and Mr. Chapman for exhausting Chunkster. He wouldn't have taken advantage of Chunkster otherwise. Quentin was a little jealous about Dustin's win. In his opinion, Dustin merely beat the opponent due to luck. Mr. Wangley, Mr. Rhys was right. Chunkster's weakness is on the top of his head. Stefan, who was being treated for his injury, shot a glance at Mr. Wangley, who seemed embarrassed and quiet. The unexpected victory set the crowd ablaze. Most were confused and doubtful about Dustin's move, but he proved that the Harmons still had a chance to fight and win. Is that all the Boulderthorn disciples have to show? Dustin stood boastfully in the ring with a disdainful smile on his lips. That insolent bastard. How dare you? This is too much. Upon hearing the insult, the Boulderthorn gang stood up in rage. Anyone who looked down on the guild would be playing with fire. You punk. You'd better tone down your ego. Brody angrily slapped the table and shot up. Quit the nonsense. If you can, take me on. Dustin was as calm as ever as he looked down upon those beneath him. Right then, the hawk-nosed elder suddenly cackled menacingly. Kiddo, did you really think you could show off a couple of amateur moves over here? If you do not believe me, come try it out for yourself. Dustin wiggled his fingers at the old man provocatively. Great. If death is what you're after, I shall grant your wish. The old man finally lost it and walked up to the ring. At the sight, everyone at the scene cheered enthusiastically. Great. The King of Kicks finally joins the battle. How dare that dude challenge the King of Kicks? He doesn't know his limits. Either way, he's going to lose. At least he'd lose with glory if he is defeated by the King of Kicks. HMPH. The King of Kicks is known to be violent. He wouldn't go easy on that kid. The crowd was murmuring about the scene in the ring. Otto snickered. Well, at least the punk will die an honorable death in the hands of the King of Kicks. He's too reckless. Did he think he could call the shots after his one lucky victory? Facing off the King of Kicks is the same as staring at death. Julie couldn't resist the touch of Schadenfreude. But she admitted that Dustin had given her many surprises. At the end of the day, she believed that he wouldn't escape his fate of being butchered. That old fart is utterly despicable. When he was repping the Harmons, he immediately ceded the fight. Now, he's fighting against us. He's the ultimate definition of shameless. Ruth was irritated. Just when there was a sliver of hope for the Harmons, the King of Kicks showed up to give them a blow. It was disgusting. There's no point talking about that. Let's think about what we're going to do after the loss. Quentin shook his head. He obviously decided that Dustin would be defeated. Hey, little punk. I'll give you a chance to live. If you bow to me here, I'll spare your life. The King of Kicks announced evilly in the ring. Bow to you. Are you asking me to bow to a filthy animal? You don't deserve that. Dustin chortled. You're a brave one. I bet you'll only regret it when you're staring at death. Looking offended, the old man took one step after another toward Dustin with an imposing air. An average martial artist would have cowered under the pressure, but Dustin stood firmly on the ground. Unaffected. To avoid accusations of bullying the young, I shall only make 3 moves on you. If you successfully block all the attacks, I'll consider you victorious, the old man said coldly. Bring it on. Dustin gestured at him. The first kick is to destroy your core. After snorting, the old man suddenly launched the first kick. He propelled himself like an arrow projecting from the bow. He was moving at an unbelievably high speed that the crowd could not make out his figure. When the old man was near enough, he quickly gave Dustin a kick in the abdomen. The strength of the kick was comparable to the destructiveness of a bullet. It was so powerful that it could make a hole in a metal board, not to mention destroying a human. Seeing that, Dustin merely smiled and swayed aside, narrowly avoiding the attack. When the kick didn't land, the old man looked quite perplexed. He had applied only half of his full strength in the first kick, which made it impossible to dodge. He is something, no wonder he's so bold. The old man scrunched his eyes and scoffed. But that's the end of it. With that, he moved across the ring again, launching his second kick with 80% of his full strength, aiming at Dustin's head this time. He was confident that Dustin would be annihilated after being struck. A figure flashed across the ring quickly. Like an apparition, Dustin twisted his body and narrowly escaped the second kick. Why? Are you starving? Why are you moving so slowly? Dustin jeered at him as though he was staring at a clown. His disdainful gaze had completely infuriated the old man. Chapter 242. You're asking for death. Incensed, the King of Kicks finally decided to give it his all. He leaped into the air and served multiple flying kicks as he landed in Dustin's direction. This time, he did not only attack Dustin point to point, he was undiscerning in his moves, offering no escape for his opponent. You punk. Let's see how you're going to dodge this. He laughed maniacally as the number of kicks increased and covered a wider scope. Dustin, who was targeted, stood there without fear. It's clear who's the winner here. Maximus shook his head and stood up to leave. He was initially surprised by Dustin's agility, but even that was no match for the King of Kicks. No level of agility could save the young man from the indiscriminate attacks by the King of Kicks. In the face of actual talent, Dustin's tricks would be of no use. All of a sudden, they heard a deafening explosion from the ring. The kicking legs in the air were nowhere to be seen. Instead, the King of Kicks stopped his leg right by Dustin's ear, but it wasn't an attempt to show mercy to Dustin. Unfortunately, his shin was locked in Dustin's grip, immobilizing him. Did I ever say I'd dodge your attacks? Dustin grinned as he grabbed the leg of the King of Kicks. Did he block the kick? Maximus, who was ready to leave, stood still, looking astonished. Not even he would think of blocking a full-strength attack from the King of Kicks, but Dustin seemed to have grabbed the opponent's leg with much ease. Maximus wondered what had happened. Was the King of Kicks conserving his energy on purpose, or did he underestimate Dustin's capability? How is that possible? How did you block that move? The old man widened his eyes in utter disbelief. Knowing he had not held back on the attack. Even though the kick wasn't his most fatal move, it was more than enough to fight against most martial artists in the field. Therefore, he was shocked to see Dustin holding his powerful leg with one hand. It was too eerie a scene to make sense. Is there even anything great about that kick of yours? It's so weak that even a 3-year-old could block it, Dustin remarked, looking unbothered. Nonsense. The old man was a ball of rage as he leaped into the air and struck again with an earth-shattering force. Hey. You used up your 3 moves. You lost. Ruth yelled at the old man, but he ignored her reminder and capitalized on the force of gravity to strike Dustin on the head. This time, he was confident that Dustin wouldn't be able to fend it off. You never learn, do you? Dustin snorted and lifted his arm to block the kick without as much as moving aside. The collision between the leg and arm resulted in an explosive sound. An invisible blast wave spread across the space from the core of the collision while strong gusts of winds roared. Dustin stood on the ground without moving an inch. He looked poised and unhurt, but multiple cracks had formed underneath his feet. On the other hand, the old man had placed one leg on Dustin's arm as he mustered up all his energy in an attempt to press his opponent onto the ground. No matter how much force he exerted, Dustin's arm remained motionless, like it was made of metal. Is that all? Dustin raised a brow, looking disdainful. Is that all the King of Kicks have to show? No. This can't be. How could you possibly block that attack? You aren't even tanked on the 100 Immortals. The old man had shock written all across his lace. He was sure that Dustin wasn't ranked because he had fought the top 10 in the ranking. The 100 Immortals. Dustin chuckled and whispered, "Let me tell you a secret, I made it to the Heavenly Immortals 10 years ago." The Heavenly Immortals. The old man was stunned by the revelation. The Heavenly Immortals were levels above the 100 Immortals, and those ranked on that list were the creme de la creme. It sounded impossible that a 20-something like Dustin managed to make it to that list. One must know that the martial artists who made it to the Heavenly Immortals were the ones who achieved divinity, at the very least. No. Impossible. You must be bluffing. The old man refused to believe Dustin's words. It was rare to run into martial artists ranked on the Heavenly Immortals, and a ranked martial artist wouldn't have lived in a small town like Swinton, to begin with. Look out for my Phoenix kick. The old man put a distance between them, followed by kicking himself off the ground and launching himself into the air. Through consecutive kicks that morphed into shadows, he initiated a crazed attack on Dustin. All show and no go. Dustin scoffed at the move and sent a punch into the soul of the old man's full. Following another explosive sound, the old man was sent flying across the air like a soccer ball. With another thud, he collapsed underneath the ring, bleeding from the orifices on his face and suffering from fractures in his legs. The crowd went dead silent at the sight of the lifeless King of Kicks on the ground. People were gaping with alarmed looks. They could not believe that the King of Kicks, from the top 10 of the 100 Immortals, had lost a battle in record time and without warning. Some of the spectators had not even recovered from the blow. More importantly, Dustin seemed to have attacked only once throughout the fight, apart from all the defensive moves and the dodging. That was the scariest observation of the night. Had the crowd not witnessed it with their own eyes, they would have scoffed at the idea of the King of Kicks losing to an obscure young man. Has the King of Kicks lost? Brody's mind went blank. He could not comprehend the situation and even went as far as to suspect the King of Kicks of staging the loss. My lord. Where did that guy come from? Otto swallowed hard as his disrespect for Dustin was replaced by shock and fear. Dustin defeating the King of Kicks was a testament to his capability. At the thought of his previous provocations toward Dustin, Otto suddenly felt a prick of fear. Thankfully, Dustin did not take the remarks too seriously. Else, Otto might have ended up as dead meat. Impossible. He's just a good for nothing. Since when has he become a master? Julie was both dumbstruck and doubtful. She refused to believe that Dustin was capable of such powerful moves. The only possible explanation was that the two men in the ring were putting on a show. The King of Kicks must have been bribed by Dustin and played out his part as the loser. Right. That must be it. Ha ha. He won. We won. Ruth squealed in excitement and showed off to the others. See that? That's my brother-in-law in the ring. Isn't he amazing? Wait. He won. How did he do it? Quentin stared on, eyes widened into sources. Never have I thought that he was a hidden talent. Since he's beaten the King of Kicks, I believe he is capable of being ranked within the top 8 in the 100 Immortals, Jessica mused. She admitted that she had missed the unpolished gem. Dustin Rhys was more remarkable than she had assumed. He's my man. So impressive. Natasha's lips curled into a dazzling smile. Her lovely eyes were filled with affection. Curiosity grew in her. She started wondering about Dustin's real identity. Chapter 243. In the ring. Dustin stood tall with hands behind his back, exuding an imposing and majestic air. He no longer hid his talents and shone from the full display of his powers. No one dared to meet his eyes. The fact that he had defeated the King of Kicks with one move made everyone look at him with awe. Surprising. The Harmons have an ace under their wings. Maximus narrowed his eyes, putting on a serious face. Dustin had won his respect through the display of strength. Not even Maximus could easily beat the King of Kicks with bare hands. Weakling. Dustin dusted and straightened his sleeve. Then, he coolly announced, "Next." The Boulderthorn disciples exchanged furtive glances. They knew they weren't Dustin's match, especially after he had defeated the King of Kicks. "Max, what do we do? That punk is wild." Feeling aggrieved, Brody clenched his jaws. "Looks like I'll have to go." Maximus stood up slowly, his eyes shining with excitement. He had shown up to the battle as the ace and wasn't originally planning to fight. In his eyes, the battle was child's play and offered no challenge. However, Dustin's presence shocked him and introduced some excitement. Maximus was not in the martial arts practice for fame or wealth, he was in search of excellence in swordsmanship. Every time he crossed paths with an ace, he would be combative. "Max, he's quite strong. Are you confident in beating him?" Brody questioned cautiously. "I am not his match if we fight barehanded, but I have full confidence if I fight him with a sword," Maximus remarked mildly. "Great. Max, give it your all. He's just trouble. We should get rid of him as soon as possible." Brody sniggered with malice. Maximus was one of the rare talents in the art of swordsmanship, ranking 6th on the 100 Immortals before reaching 30 years of age. He was levels above the King of Kicks and especially invincible when fighting with a sword. Once, Brody's father predicted that Maximus would achieve divinity within 3 years. By that time, Maximus would already make it to the Heavenly Immortals. "What's up? Is there no one else from Boulderthorn?" Dustin scanned the space with a sharp glare. "I'll go." Maximus leaped into the air, and when he was close to landing, he tapped the tip of his feet on the shoulder of a spectator before bouncing back up in the air with extreme nimbleness. His movements were fairy-like, making the group of women in the guild squeal in admiration, their eyes sparkling in awe. "Wow. He's so cool. A young man who looks great in white, he's my type." Not only was Maximus blessed with good looks and gentlemanly, but he also pulled off a spectacular entrance, giving off the impression of a young knight. "Who are you?" Dustin scanned him from head to toe. "I'm Maximus Kane, one of Boulderthorn's disciples. I'm here for the experience." Maximus bowed at him politely. His self-introduction caused a commotion within the guild. Maximus Kane. Isn't he ranked 6th on the 100 Immortals? That's right. He's the famous Lightning Blade in Belerno. I had the honor of witnessing him in action. Oh, fuck. It's Maximus, Lightning Blade, Kane. I heard that his sword moved as fast as lightning. He's never lost a battle ever since he gained his fame. This is going to be fun. The crowd discussed Maximus with great interest, for Maximus was an ace ranked 6th on the 100 Immortals, much stronger than the King of Kicks, who ranked 9th. The gap in their rankings was huge, even though they were 3 places apart. It was hard to climb up in the ranking once a martial artist entered the top 10. The top 5 names in the ranking barely changed, they practically maintained the same ranking all year round. Finally, a normal opponent. Dustin looked amused and gestured, "Please. Just a minute." Maximus said with seriousness. "I'm good at swordsmanship. Shall we change the battle into an armed fight?" "Hey. You can't change the rules as you wish. We disagree with that." Ruth instantly protested unhappily at the suggestion. Any sane person knew that a bare-handed fight was totally different than fighting with weapons. An average man armed with a weapon could beat a group of opponents, not to mention that the person in question was Maximus, Lightning Blade, Kane. Why? Are you afraid that he'd lose to Max? Brody jeered at her. If you're scared, just admit defeat right now. Stop wasting our time. We're not. You guys are the ones who break the martial arts code. Ruth argued the facts. Nonsense. We never banned weapons from battles. Why don't you get Rhys to use a weapon too? Brody laughed frostily. You. Ruth choked in anger. Sure. Use a weapon if you'd like. It doesn't make a difference. Dustin was unconcerned and agreed to the change without fuss. A frustrated Ruth felt that his remarks went against all her effort to fight in his interest. Many thanks. Maximus bowed again and drew his sword out of the sheath from the back. He even introduced it. My sword is 3 feet and 6 inches long. It is made from deep iron and has been my companion for 5 years. It is so solid that it penetrates almost everything. Come at me. Dustin waved. Where's your weapon? Maximus raised an eyebrow quizzically. My bare hands are my weapons. Dustin answered. Are you sure? Maximus narrowed his eyes, thinking that his opponent was capable but overconfident. Dustin would be humiliated if he wanted to block the sword attack with bare hands. Of course. I'll give it to you if you manage to injure me. Dustin waved at him once more. Come on. Okay. Be my guest. Without further ado, Maximus propelled himself forward with the unsheathed sword in hand. When he got closer to Dustin, he plunged his sword at the opponent, creating glimmers of metallic reflection and stirring gusts of wind in the quild. Great move. Most of the martial artists exclaimed in astonishment. Maximus' sword moved fast and was unusually sharp. It was hard to tell the sword from its shadows, hence it was hard to defend oneself. Even skillful martial artists at the same level dared not fight barehanded against the sword. However, Dustin stood in the same spot and appeared as though he hadn't noticed the attack. That rascal is bold. Why isn't he dodging Maximus' sword attack? Did he think he's invincible after beating the king of kicks? He has no idea how powerful Maximus is. Right. There is a huge gap in capability between each member of the top 10 of the 100 immortals. Looking down on Maximus is the same as digging your own grave. Amid the murmurs, everyone heard a soft clunking sound as Maximus' sword came to a halt. The sharp blade came to a stop an inch before Dustin's throat, unable to move. When the crowd took a second look, their faces turned white because they realized that Dustin had caught the sword between his 2 fingers. Chapter 244. Maximus's pupils dilated. He didn't expect Dustin to grab his sword with bare fingers. It appeared that he had underestimated Dustin's sheer talent and confidence. Still, he was unflustered by the strength of his opponent. Quite the opposite, the stronger the opponent, the more excited he felt. He was getting more belligerent as a result. Return. With the wave of a hand, Maximus called his sword back from Dustin's fingers. The sword came flying back like a serpent. Oh. Dustin was rather surprised by the move. Although he had reined in his capabilities to match his opponent at the earthly level, he acknowledged Maximus' talent from how Maximus managed to free the weapon from his grip. Look out. I'll show you my illusory sword technique. Maximus dropped a reminder before waving his sword again. In one move, his sword split into hundreds and thousands of different swords. The gleaming blades danced around, weaving a confusing web of swords within 10 meters around them. The mind-boggling amount of swords made it hard to discern the actual sword from the illusory ones. Wow. It is the illusory sword technique. Looks like Maximus Kane is getting serious. I heard that no one could fight off the illusory sword technique. That punk is going to lose. Kill. Kill. Kill him. There was an uproar among the audience. Some were shocked, some were concerned, and some were merely adding insult to injury. Soon, Dustin vanished in the midst of the illusory swords in front of their eyes. He and Maximus were nowhere to be seen, leaving only the blinding shine of blades dancing in the ring. The audience glued their eyes to the match and struggled to figure out which of them was making the moves. Even so, they couldn't take their eyes off the climactic fight for fear of missing out on the highlights. Dustin, the Black Horse, had garnered all the attention that night by fighting alone against Mr. Williams' lineup. Earlier, he took down 2 masters in the top 10 of the 100 Immortals. Even if he lost the fight against Maximus, he still won himself the right to feel proud of his accomplishments. 3 minutes later, the audience heard the clanking of metal as the web of illusory swords suddenly vanished. A figure, who seemed to have taken a bad blow, stumbled speedily toward the edge of the ring, where he finally managed to steady himself. Everyone focused on the figure and realized that it was Maximus. As for Dustin, he stood in the middle of the ring without moving, remaining in the same position as before. What happened? Who won? The audience exchanged glances in confusion. Dustin and Maximus looked unharmed, but one appeared poised while the other looked grim. Sir, you are indeed talented, I'll give you that. I concede defeat. After a long silence, Maximus finally opened his mouth. He conceded. The audience gasped. What was going on? The 2 of them stood there uninjured. No one had the upper hand yet, but why did Maximus concede defeat? Could he have been bought off by the Harmons, just like the King of Kicks? Max, what is that nonsense? Us Boulderthorn Guild men never concede defeat. Murder that punk. Brody stood up and bellowed after recovering from the initial shock. Shut up. Maximus scoffed. You have to admit defeat when you know it. There's no shame in admitting you're not as good as your opponent. The audience might not be able to tell, but he was well aware of the truth. Chapter 245. Maximus witnessed how Dustin handled the illusory sword technique with ease. Even if he maxed up his powers and executed the complete set of moves in the technique, he still failed to harm a hair on Dustin's head, not to mention that Dustin had only fended off the attacks with one hand. To Maximus, these were proof that Dustin was greatly ahead of him in terms of capability. You have indeed mastered the illusory sword technique, but unfortunately, there are 3 flaws. Dustin suggested mildly. He accorded Maximus respect due to the latter's humbleness. Else, he would have sent him flying out of the ring. What are the 3 flaws? Maximus furrowed his brow. The 3rd move, the 9th move, and the 26th move. Dustin deliberately offered a reminder. The flaws you exhibited in the 3 moves were extremely subtle. They will go unnoticeable in the eyes of an average martial artist, but they will also put you at a huge disadvantage when you are fighting the real masters. Impossible. I have been practicing the technique forever. How could there be fatal flaws? Maximus was in disbelief. Sure, you have spent a lot of time on the practice, but it is also true that you exhibit those flaws. If my guess is right, your mentor did not teach you everything he hid part of the 3 moves from you. Plus, the 3 moves are extremely crucial and damaging. The mentor must have wanted to put you in harm's way. Why else would anyone do that? You'd better look out. Dustin lowered his voice into a whisper that was only audible to both of them. The revelation was a huge blow for Maximus. That's nonsense. My mentor sees me as his son. He'd never put me in danger. I'm not going to say more. Believe me or not, it's all up to you. Dustin shrugged and sank into silence. The only reason he gave Maximus the advice was because he saw potential in the guy. Whether Maximus trusted his word and whether the man lived or died, Dustin would not be affected in any way. We lost the battle today. Hence, we shall not bring up the topic of Immortunal. Farewell. Maximus nodded at Dustin and left the ring in strides. He won. The Harmons won again. Ruth squealed in delight at the sight. Who else would beat Dustin when even Maximus, ranked 6th on the 100 Immortals, admitted delete. You punk. We shall see. This is not the end. After shooting a death glare at Dustin, Brody fled the scene with his group of men, looking demotivated. He thought that their plan was perfect, only to be ruined by a formidable opponent out of the blue. Talk about bad luck. Otto, have we gotten ourselves into trouble? The young men and ladies, who had previously mocked Dustin, trembled at the sight of the victorious man in the ring. Fuck. He's a monster. Let's leave now. Otto was covered in a cold sweat and fled the scene immediately. He would be easily crushed by Dustin, judging from how the man had defeated the King of Kicks and Maximus, Lightning Blade, Kane. Young man, congratulations on the win. I am the leader of Humming Hill. I wonder if you'd be interested in joining us as a consultant. Our pay and benefits are among the best. Right after Dustin exited the ring, a group of martial artists circled him to poach the talent. Humming Hill. That's a really tiny guild. Better not stunt the growth of our handsome dude here. Well, in my opinion, you should join us at the Valley of Joy. We have hot chicks around, and we offer a wealth of resources. I guarantee you'll be on cloud 9 after joining us. Young man, I am the Falcon King of Glenstead and have a good-looking and well-educated granddaughter. If you're willing, I will offer you her hand in marriage. Dustin was speechless by the greedy expressions on their faces. His excellent performance in beating the King of Kicks and Maximus, Lightning Blade, Kane had attracted a high level of attention. He made a mental note to keep a low profile moving forward. Get out of my way. At that moment, Natasha squeezed her way through the crowd with her people. Then, she took Dustin by the arm and publicly declared their relationship. First of all, I'd like to introduce him as my husband. You'd better give up if you're trying to matchmake. Not only that, she kissed Dustin on the cheek as a reward, causing him to turn red in the face. Her action was embarrassing and rather improper in front of the crowd. Darling, let's go. She ignored the eyes on them and left the guild with Dustin in tow, looking gleeful, proud, and boastful. The battle, which was full of twists and turns, ended with a victory for the Harmon family. From that moment, a new talent rose in Balerno's martial arts scene. After beating Maximus, Dustin naturally assumed his opponent's ranking, and he was subsequently ranked 6th on the 100 Immortals, which was a brilliant feat for a newcomer. Chapter 246. After the battle concluded, Dustin, Natasha, and some members of the Harmon family had supper together. It was midnight when he returned to the medical center, which was still brightly lit. He entered the center and immediately saw the stunning Dahlia Nicholson, who was merrily chatting away with Caitlin Lawler. At that moment, she appeared more easygoing than how she usually presented herself. Icy. Mr. Rhys, you're back. Seeing Dustin, Caitlin stood up and greeted him. Have a chat with Ms. Nicholson. I'll serve supper. It's okay. I had supper before I came home. He smiled and turned his attention to Dahlia. Why are you here? I'm here to thank you. She flashed him a rare smile. If you hadn't saved me yesterday, I would have been screwed. Never in my life would I have thought that Matt Laney was a phony bastard. You're most welcome. I'd offer the same help to anyone in that situation, he replied unemotionally. Why? Are you still upset? Her tone softened. My mom was a little rash. There was a misunderstanding. I'll apologize to you on her behalf. We're sorry. Dustin was rather surprised by her action. In his recollection, Dahlia was never one to back down. It was unusual of her to offer an apology. Still, the apology arrived too late. There's no need to apologize. After all, this is not the first time I'm misunderstood. It doesn't matter to me. He shrugged, looking unbothered. Dustin, I know you were treated unfairly and went through hard times. I promise that I'll never treat you badly again, she declared with a serious face. What was that? That was out of the blue. He stared at her funny. She took a deep breath and mustered up her courage to say, come home with me. All right. His body froze at the simple suggestion, and complicated emotions clouded his eyes. Had Dahlia asked him earlier, he would have agreed to her suggestion without hesitation. Alas, after experiencing a series of challenging events, he was bone-tired, scared of being hurt, and had moved on. Although he still had feelings for her, he refused to experience the past anymore. His life in the past was one of silent suffering. I know you're in a difficult position. You don't have to give me an answer now. Dahlia merely beamed at him. I have thought it through. From now on, I will take back what's mine. Even if I have to fight against Natasha Harmon, I will never back down. You know me well. I never give up until I get what I want. He was taken aback by the serious expression on her face. Did you drink tonight? Dahlia was known to be distant and haughty, never sparing anyone a display of friendliness. It was hard to believe she'd make that remark with a belligerent attitude. What had gotten into her? I'm not drunk. In fact, I'm very sober. When you're free, relay my message to Natasha. Let's compete fairly. And we shall see who's the winner. With that, she stood on tiptoe and gave him a sudden peck on the lips. She coolly marched out of the medical center, but her flushed face betrayed her emotions. Dustin was frozen on the spot as he tasted her sweetness on his lips. Was he ambushed just now? Since when did Dahlia learn to flirt? He wondered if women were all fickle-minded. Mr. Rhys, if it's inconvenient for you to relay that message to Ms. Harmon, I can help. Caitlin, blushing in embarrassment, twiddled with the hem of her top. After all, that was a scene only found in TV shows. What nonsense. Go to bed. He glared at her, to which she responded by sticking out her tongue. She ran into the guest room but soon poked her head out and questioned timidly. Mr. Rhys, which one of them do you love? You little rascal. Why do you keep running your mouth? Dustin grabbed a duster and acted as though he wanted to give her a good whopping, and she quickly disappeared into the room out of fear. After a quiet night, Dustin woke up early the next morning, stirred by the memory of the kiss from the day before. He had tossed and turned in bed, feeling disturbed by it. Oh, Dahlia, why did you show up from nowhere just to mess with me? He wondered. Chapter 247. Dustin decided that Dahlia must have had nothing better to do. He tossed his head, washed up, and opened the door to the medical center as usual. As the door grated and groaned, a blood-soaked figure suddenly collapsed on the floor of the room. The injured man was dressed in white, which was drenched in blood. He carried a broken sword on his back and appeared to have fainted for some time. Dustin approached the man to check him out, only to realize that it was Maximus Kane. I did not recall hurting him yesterday. Or did I? Dustin rubbed his chin in confusion. Although Maximus, ranked 6th on the 100 Immortals, was not exactly the cream of the crop, he was still one of the best in Tiny Swinton. How did he get himself beaten up this badly? Consider yourself lucky. Dustin mumbled and lifted Maximus into the medical center. After all, he couldn't turn a blind eye to a dying man at the entrance of the medical center. Maximus suffered from multiple external injuries, but those were simple wounds that could be treated with some bandages. However, he suffered huge damage to his nerves, including the energy in his core. Whoever did this to him wanted to cripple him for good. Thankfully, years of extensive martial arts practice resulted in a solid foundation that protected Maximus from being completely crippled by the attack. With Dustin's medical skills, he was confident to heal Maximus within a few weeks. First, Dustin gave Maximus an injection, followed by feeding the patient some medicine. About half an hour later, Maximus finally regained consciousness as he slowly opened his eyes. Hey, you're awake. How do you feel? Dustin casually asked him. Did you save me? Maximus was a little taken aback. Last night, he sustained severe injuries and found a medical center on the street in between consciousness. Before he had a chance to knock on the door, he blacked out at the entrance. Who else? Do you see anyone around? Dustin was a tad speechless at the thoughtless question. Thank you. Maximus struggled to get up and bow. Dustin forced him back onto the bed and chided him, that's enough. Stop moving around when you're badly injured. He's on the brink of death, yet he is hung up on manners. What's wrong with this dude? Dustin wondered. You're not bad at martial arts. So, how did you end up getting beaten up? Dustin asked. Maximus clenched his teeth as he struggled to open up. It's fine. Don't tell me if you don't feel like it. I'm not that curious either. Dustin waved at him dismissively and proceeded to leave. Wait. Maximus took a deep breath and finally confessed, what you said yesterday was right. I had 3 fatal flaws in my illusory sword technique. Oh. Really? Did you meet a worthy opponent that fast? Dustin was quite surprised to learn that his prediction came true after he dropped a casual mention of the flawed moves during the battle. It wasn't just any stranger, it was my mentor, Luther Williams. Maximus gritted his teeth, his face clouded by a grim expression. Your mentor? Dustin was astounded. Why did he hurt you for no good reason? That's because I caught him having an affair with my female mentee. Maximus said, filled with resentment. I went home after the defeat, thinking to question Luther Williams about the flaws in the technique he taught me, but instead, I caught him going at it with my young female mentee in the bedroom. Maximus continued, so, I kicked the door open out of anger and confronted him loudly. He was probably humiliated and provoked, and he fought me with his sword, slashing me twice. I had no choice but to fight him with my sword. Silly me. I thought that, given my expertise in swordsmanship, I could at least fend off his attacks even if I couldn't win. Then, he hissed, I realized how naive I was when we started fighting. It wasn't practice or strength that I lacked, he took advantage of my flawed moves. The 3rd, 9th, and 26th moves. Whenever I put these moves into action, Luther was able to spot my flaws and destroy me. It was at that moment I found out that Luther, the mentor I was so proud of, had set me up from the very beginning. I am nothing but a tool to him. He has never treated me from the heart. When I am upset at him, he'll exploit my flawed moves to kill me off and save himself from trouble. Maximus' eyes reddened and brimmed with tears. He had always regarded his mentor as a father figure. Who would have thought that the kind and generous old man was nothing but a hypocrite? Well, what can I say, except that you have a scoundrel of a mentor? Dustin shook his head sympathetically. Maximus' situation was commonplace in the martial arts world. History was full of cases where disciples and mentors of the same guild tore each other apart. The human heart is the most deceitful of all things. I'm fine with being taken advantage of. He could have sent me on a dangerous mission, and I would have taken on the task without complaining. But why? Why did he have to sully my female mentee? She's my fiancée. Maximus bellowed and smashed a hole in the wall out of rage. Dustin gaped at the confession. He opened his mouth a few times but was unable to speak. Chapter 248. Dustin felt sympathetic as he stared into Maximus' reddened eyes. Not only was the poor chap taken advantage of by his mentor, but he also had his fiancée taken away. How miserable. No man could endure the humiliation and resentment of losing his future wife. Heck, not even anyone could stand losing a future spouse. It was hard to imagine that the second in command of Boulderthorn was, in fact, a wicked and dishonorable man. Just focus on your recovery for now. When you're fully recovered, it'll be time to take back what you lost. Dustin gave Maximus an encouraging pat on the shoulder. To that, Maximus howled with a desolate expression, I'll never get better again, not after my core was shattered and my nerves damaged. After losing my internal energy, I have nothing left in me to take revenge. I'm trash. I'm a worthless piece of trash. He rolled his fists, digging his fingernails deep into the flesh of his palms until blood trickled from between his thumb and index finger. He badly wanted to take his revenge and seek justice, but he had lost the opportunity to do so. Who said you're trash? I can heal your injuries, Dustin interjected coolly. What did you say? Stunned, Maximus lifted his head almost instantly. I said I can heal your injuries and rejuvenate your core, Dustin repeated himself. Are you sure? You're not kidding me, right? Maximus was wide-eyed with a mix of shock and anticipation. Your core suffered some damage, but it's not utterly ruined. There's still a chance. Rejuvenating your nerves is even simpler. As long as you stick to my treatment, you'll regain full strength within 10 days. Dustin promised. Maximus' face lit up with joy upon hearing that. He thanked Dustin profusely. If you heal me, I shall owe my life to you. Be it scaling mountains or diving into the deep ocean, I'll do whatever you ask of me without a complaint. He seemed serious about his promise. As a martial artist and a geek for swords, he never had an interest in much else but the pursuit of excellence in swordsmanship. The moment he learned that his core was destroyed, he fell into deep despair and even contemplated ending his life. However, Dustin's remark reignited his hope and his will to live. Okay, that's enough. I'm not a sadist. Why would I send you to the mountains and the ocean? Dustin helped him up. Consider it fate that you fainted right in front of my medical center. It was God's will to have me rescue you. Get some good rest, and remember not to harness your internal energy in these 2 days. Thank you. You're my savior. Maximus bowed a few times to Dustin, who said nothing more but wrote a prescription for Caitlin and reminded her to prepare the medicine according to the schedule. At that moment, they heard a deafening crash from the outside. They jumped in shock and hurried out to check the situation. 2 cars, one red and one white, collided on a street not far away. The red BMW, it appeared, had reversed and crashed into a white Honda, causing the latter to flip. Both cars were mangled beyond recognition, with debris scattered all across the ground. Help! Please help my daughter. A bleeding woman clad in white clothing climbed out of the white Honda. Due to the impact of the collision, she looked dizzy and feeble. At the same time, a young girl was in the front passenger seat. She had lost consciousness. The girl was no older than 8 years old, and she seemed to be in a critical state because her abdomen was pierced by a sharp object. The woman in white called for help while attempting to save her daughter, but she failed to open the car door because it was too misshapen. Crap! Dustin's face fell, and he jogged toward the Honda. By then, a crowd had formed around the accident, and a few good Samaritans offered help. Unfortunately, the collective strength of a few people was insufficient to pull the girl out because the Honda was flipped over, and the car door remained locked. As the smoke started billowing from the car, the situation became dire. I'll give it a try. Dustin went up and yanked at the door handle. They heard a crack, and the entire car door came detached, much to the surprise of the onlookers. After Dustin pried the door open, he unfastened the seat belt and quickly lifted the young girl to the side of the road. She suffered from head trauma, multiple fractures across the body, and massive blood loss in the abdomen. The situation did not look good at all. Quick! Call an ambulance and get her to the hospital. Someone yelled. We have no time for that. I'm a doctor. Let me give it a try. After Dustin announced his identity, he took out a gold needle and immediately applied first aid to the girl. Get out of my way. All of you. Right then, 2 women exited the red BMW. The mother was a plump lady in her 50s, and the daughter was an attractive woman in her 20s. One could tell that they were wealthy from the branded outfits and the way they were decked in jewelry, like walking Christmas trees. Hey! Do you even know how to drive? Are you blind? Jane Engleton, the plump lady, pointed a finger at the woman in white and started scolding her. Do you know how much our car costs? $1 million. And it's a new car. She added, you have to compensate us after turning our car into scrap metal. If you refuse, I'll send your family to prison. The woman in white was taken aback by the ferocity of Jane Engleton and apologized profusely. I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. I did not see your car just now. Is saying sorry enough? Do you take us as pushovers? Jane pressed on. I'm warning you now. You'll pay me what the car's worth. Add the compensation for mental damages on that, and you're looking at least $800,000 to $1 million in compensation to get this settled. I don't have that money. The woman in white almost cried helplessly from the harassment. I don't care. Sell your house or your organs. Do what you need to gather the money, or I'll teach you a lesson. Jane threatened the poor woman. Finally, Dustin had had enough and blurted out, "Can you be more shameless? It was you who reversed and crashed into the white car. How dare you demand compensation from the victim?" The truth immediately woke the onlookers up. Upon examining the scene of the accident, it was the BMW that reversed and crashed into the Honda. Therefore, the BMW driver should be held fully accountable for the collision, but she had instead held the victim responsible. Nonsense. She crashed into my car. Jane remained unfazed and coercive. So what if I reversed my car? Her eyes were not focused on the road. Look, the lives of commoners like you are not worth much. Even if they died in a crash, they totally deserved it. The crowd instantly gasped at her outrageous remark. Chapter 249. Hey, you're being unreasonable. Right. How dare she scolds the others when she's the culprit? I've never seen someone as outrageous as her. Talk no more. Let's report her to the police. The crowd was annoyed at Jane's arrogance and pointed fingers at her. Shut up. All of you. Hands on her waist, Jane yelled at him. Do you know that we're the Nicholsons from Glenstead? Even your mayor has to show us respect, let alone you worthless plebs. Make more fuss, and I'll get you arrested. The accusatory voices instantly died down. An average citizen would not want to get on the bad side of the famed aristocratic Nicholson family from Glenstead. Mom, just ignore those peasants. Look at this. I'm hurt. The young woman, Dakota Nicholson, suddenly spoke up as she pressed against her wound and winced. Are you hurt? Let me take a look. Jane's expression crumbled, and she hurriedly checked out Dakota's injury. Gosh, it's bleeding. This is not good. Her face paled, and she scanned the surroundings until her eyes landed on Dustin. Hey, you're a doctor, aren't you? Quick, give my daughter a checkup. She's hurt. Anyone would have thought that Dakota contracted a terminal disease from the worried look on Jane's face. She's fine. It's just a scrape on the elbow. Dustin turned around and glanced at Dakota's injury before looking away. What do you mean? A scrape? Jane immediately looked irritated. My precious daughter has never suffered injuries. But she has a huge wound now. Of course we'll have to treat it with caution. What if an infection happens? If you're worried about wound infection, buy a band-aid at the pharmacy next door. If you keep dilly-dallying, the wound's going to heal by the time you get to it, Dustin mocked her. He had never seen a woman as ridiculous as Jane, who kicked up a fuss over a tiny wound. What did you say? How could you ignore my daughter's injury when you're a doctor? Are you even human, you fuckface? Jane was truly cross. No one had ever turned down her requests ever since she married into the wealthy Nicholson family. I have to set my priorities. This girl is fighting for her life. Your daughter's wound is nothing compared to hers. Dustin chided her. How dare you compare that peasant to my daughter? With a glare, Jane rebuked him. Dakota is the daughter of the Nicholson family. She's important and precious. You cannot compare her to a commoner. Yeah. She's just a nobody. Well, if she dies today, just consider it her wretched fate. The haughty Dakota towered over them. Treat my wound now. It's an order. If I get a scar from this, I will not let you off the hook. Are you even human? Nobody speaks in that way. That's right. Is a life worth less than your minor scrape? The indignant crowd gave their opinions. What now? Are you testing me? The audacity to talk back to the Nicholson family. Come here. Which one of you wants to be the hero? Jane hissed maliciously as the onlookers held in their rage in silence in the face of her insolence. Indeed, the average citizens were helpless when harassed and bullied by the rich. Madam, my daughter is in a critical state. Can you kindly allow her to get the treatment? Just think of this as my plea. The woman in white plopped onto the ground with teary eyes. HMPH. Knock it off. I don't care. My daughter has to be treated first. Jane refused to budge. Are you deal? Do you hear what my mom said? Dakota kicked Dustin but was infuriated when the man showed no response. So, you're refusing to treat my wound. Great. Don't bother saving anyone today. With that, she went up to the young girl and pulled out the gold needle. With the gold needle removed, the young girl started bleeding profusely again, and her face grew paler because of that. Dustin frowned and spun around with a deadly stare in his eyes. Do you know what you're doing? You might kill someone by pulling out the needle without thought. So what? You can't save any life without my permission. Dakota crossed her arms on her chest, looking bold and arrogant. Jane chimed in with the same attitude. That's right. If you don't treat my daughter's wound, you won't get to save that useless commoner. Please show mercy and stop making things difficult for the doctor. I beg of you. The woman in white kneeled and pleaded to the Nicholsons, all while hitting her head on the ground. She knew she could not afford to get on the bad side of the wealthy. Her only wish was to keep her daughter safe. Try messing around again, and I won't go easy on you next time. Dustin warned Dakota. She scoffed. Oh. You got the guts, don't you? Do you know who I am? How dare you speak to me in that way? Did you tell me not to touch anything? Well, I'm going to do it anyway. While speaking, she moved to remove the needle again. Get lost. Fuming. Dustin gave her a slap across the face. She yelped as she was flung 10 feet away, even rolling on the ground after landing. Her fair skin was red and swollen. She even lost a few of her dental laminates. Shit. That doctor is mad. How dare he slap a Nicholson? Being hot-blooded is one thing. Offending the Nicholsons is another. He might suffer because of it. The crowd murmured and cast sympathetic glances at Dustin. How dare you hit me? Dakota got up from the ground, still a little dizzy and utterly baffled by Dustin's move. From a young age, she was treated like a princess wherever she went. She had never been slapped, not to mention being slapped in public. So what? Don't you deserve the slap for being rude? Dustin wore a hostile expression on his face. How dare you hit my daughter? I'm going to fight you. After the initial shock, Jane recovered and, her blood boiling, she launched an attack on Dustin. He merely slapped her, and she collapsed from the impact. The mother and daughter both fell flat onto the ground. Chapter 250. Mom. Are you all right? Dakota's expression crumbled as she quickly helped her mother up. She was both alarmed and enraged. Ouch. My teeth. Jane wailed while pressing a hand against her face, feeling the stinging sensation. Her mouth was throbbing after it almost went out of shape from the slap. How dare you hit us? You're dead. Your entire family is damned. Be a man and stay where you are. I'll teach you a lesson. An incensed Dakota started making calls and requesting backup, but Dustin had no time for her as he continued applying first aid to the poor young girl. Thanks to the magical needle, the young girl's condition stabilized soon. At that time, the ambulance arrived at the scene. Your daughter is fine now, but her wound needs bandaging and careful care to heal. Dustin placed the young girl onto the stretcher. Seeing that, the woman in white thanked him profusely before leaving in the ambulance. You enjoy being the hero, don't you? Just wait and see. You'll get flamed. Jane and Dakota fixed the keen eyes on him, looking as though they wouldn't let it slip. Dustin scanned them from head to toe and commented mildly, rather than wasting time on me, you should really get checked at the hospital. From the looks of it, you're suffering from blood stasis. You don't have much internal energy, and your eyes are those of dead fish. I'm afraid your days are numbered. Nonsense. You're the one who's dying. I'm fine. Jane glared at him. He raised a brow, looking amused. Oh, you don't believe me. Have you been feeling dizzy and weak these few days? And do you suffer from nosebleeds now and then? How did you know? Her expression crumbled a little. Indeed, she had been feeling sick, and the symptoms matched his descriptions. However, she went for a checkup at the hospital and found no issues. Hence, She had put it to the back of her mind. It's no cause for concern. Just a terminal illness, he added nonchalantly. Terminal illness. The color drained from Jane's face. She was stunned by the diagnosis. How was a terminal illness not a cause for concern? Mom, don't listen to his nonsense. He's obviously scaring you because he worries we'll get back at him. Dakota suddenly jumped in to assuage her. You take supplements all the time. Why would you fall sick? And no sick person would be full of energy like you. That's right, I do not suffer from any illness. I'm in the pink of health. Jane nodded furiously and jeered, you bastard. I'm warning you, you'd better quit all that nonsense. Judging from the progression, you'll face a life-threatening situation in 3 days. On the first day, you'll lose consciousness, followed by coughing up blood on the second day. You'll be paralyzed on the third day. 3 days later, you will be staring at death, he remarked quietly. It made Jane feel oddly anxious, and her heart skipped a beat. Still, she bit the bullet and bellowed at him, do you think I'm a coward? Tell you what, you can't bluff your way out of this. Believe it or not, it's up to you. Take care. He was uninterested in engaging further with the Nicholsons and left. Hey. Stand there. I didn't tell you to leave. Dakota was frustrated and went up to stop him, but his glare immediately put her in her place. She promptly stopped in her tracks out of consideration for her safety, knowing that Dustin was a madman. Let him leave. He won't run far. When our backup arrives, we'll double down on him. Jane had a hostile look on her face. During their conversation, they noticed a few black SUVs stopping by the intersection. The door slid open to reveal Florence and James. The two marched toward Jane and Dakota. Gosh. Jane. Dakota. What happened? Florence, acting humbly, immediately started with pleasantries. Henry Nicholson's family was a branch of the Nicholsons of Glenstead. However, due to Henry's protest against an arranged marriage, he eloped to Swinton with his lover. The two families were not in frequent contact. After the demise of the Glenstead patriarch, Edgar Nicholson, the family in Glenstead sent 2 representatives, Jane and Dakota, to meet with Henry in Swinton, mainly to fulfill Edgar's wish. Edgar's last wish was for Henry, the second son, to return to Glenstead. HMPH. How dare you ask us? Jane was ashen-faced. We came all the way to this tiny town of yours. Not only did you not host us well, but you also made us go through humiliation. It looks like your family doesn't want to reunite with us at Glenstead. Florence, James, and their companions almost peed themselves after hearing that. They were well aware of the perks of reuniting with the Nicholsons of Glenstead. The move would elevate the status of the Nicholson family of Swinton, and they would never let the opportunity slip. Jane, please calm down. Let us know if you need anything else. I promise I'll take care of it for you. Florence hurriedly put on an apologetic smile. James echoed her with confidence. That's right. We'll take action on that rascal who hits you no matter who he is. What's the use of saying that? He's gone. Dakota pouted crossly. If her grandfather hadn't ordered him to get the task done, she wouldn't have visited a small town like Swinton with her status. It's okay. There's a surveillance camera by the intersection. I will get someone to check on it right away and catch the culprit tomorrow to ensure justice is served. Florence promised. HMPH. That's more like it. Dakota's features softened, and she added. Oh. And get the best doctor for me. Dakota, are you hurt? James looked shocked. He stole a few glances at her but did not see any tears on her outfit or any visible wounds. That's nonsense. Didn't you see that I'm bleeding from my elbow? Are you blind? She scoffed while showing everyone the graze on her elbow. When they took a better look at it, they were baffled at what she described as an injury, for that was a wound that only required a band-aid. Why are you standing there? Get the car and send Dakota to the hospital. I'll give you a whopping if you miss the golden hour. Florence was quick to slap James on the back of his head. Jane Engleton and Dakota Nicholson had the final say on whether or not Florence's family could rejoin the Glenstead relatives. Therefore, she would treat the two women with the utmost respect. Okay, James dared not object. Along with a few other relatives, he helped Jane and Dakota into the SUVs like they were royalties. Then, they rushed the two women to the hospital.